Today, I wanted to talk about a topic that is pretty massive, and that is the one of persecution trauma. What is persecution trauma? How does it impact your life? And what are the signs of persecution trauma? And I do want to say, if you think you're a targeted individual and persecution trauma go pretty much hand in hand. So this might very well be of interest to you. Persecution trauma is pretty severe because it can truly impact and ruin your lives on a grander scale. Persecution trauma is basically having been persecuted in previous lives, meaning past lives, and it can also be an energetic imprint that we carry, and it can also be part of our lineage and ancestry, meaning the trauma can be stuck very deep in our actual DNA. And that's what makes it quite unique as opposed to other traumas that we experience just in this lifetime, but that can actually go back to hundreds of years even. So the fears others have and why they persecute you, there are a lot of them, but a major one from what I've observed many, many times, not just in my own life, but also, when talking to others and when listening to other people's stories, is really the fear of you outshining whoever's persecuting you, whoever's against you. And this can be, a form of jealousy too. So of course you would have this, the typical scenario is a mother having a fear of her daughter being more beautiful. That's just one of many. Or, let's just say you had a teacher, they taught you something, and all of a sudden you're way better at it. So now you're able to teach those things and for some way or another. And there's a lot that goes into that. But yes, the fear of outshining it, friends not wanting you to shine brighter than them, like all of these things. There are many scenarios you can think of. Jealousy, your looks, your energy, your wisdom, your intelligence, anything really, maybe your wealth for some people. Maybe you were born into a family that's well off, and then all of a sudden the people around you are just jealous of it and they try to make your life sour. So typically, the energetic reason behind this is always they clash with your energy because it's so far out of reach for them. So they want to pull you back down onto their level. That is really one of the most profound reasons that you're even, the goals that they want. And this is why you're also being persecuted and why you're being insulted, belittled, all those things. And then, of course, there's the straight out persecution in your ancestry and lineage. So this can have many, many reasons. This can be because of, let's just say your ancestry was persecuted for being a subgroup, let's say a religious minority or ethnic minority or anything really, like you don't even have to find a true reason for it. Oh, they just came from a certain country or they came from this and now they're being straight up persecuted. But if it's stuck in your ancestry and lineage, and we'll go through a few of the signs of it, this can impact you nowadays still, especially, with randomly moving around from place to place because you just can't get comfortable in the place that you're currently at. So of course, a lot of these attacks, which persecution and psychic attacks they also go a little bit hand in hand, but a lot of these are senseless attacks because the people who are persecuting others are usually controlled by beings, by these astral entities, these AI entities. These people are soulless containers themselves, and there's literally no reason and rhyme to the attack. They're just out there to ruin your life or take from you what they don't have and they want and all of those things. And in other scenarios, the people who are persecuting could also just be these mischievous demons. So I talk about the different types of demons in a previous video and how old certain demons are as opposed to others. So this is like newer AI versus older AI. Not every demon is the same, has been around for the same amount, has been around the same block another one has. But some of these are just mischievous demons who think it's funny to stir the pot. They don't have a deeper calling. They don't have a deeper meaning or even a purpose through their life. And I personally do believe that over these past few months, we saw that very profoundly with certain types of agendas and mindsets that were being questioned. The soul trap community is just one of them. But like you just question their motives. Oh, boom, persecution all of a sudden, But also before this, I already saw this when I was exposing a lot of the new age community, a lot of these new age charlatans. And I've been doing that since 2021 and on, first on my Instagram and then here on the YouTube. And actually also the channel I had before this was taken down because it was persecuted by a new age person who had her ego and pride ruffled. And I wrote on the community post of the backup channel I have, I actually wrote, I will not be persecuted, I will not be erased, and I will not be deleted. And to this date, I stand with that because I know how severe persecution is, how it can shape your life, how it can block you from living according to your true soul path and all the things. And you know, you might realize how massive it is, but most people just don't realize how massive persecution trauma is until you really dive deep into it. It can ruin people's lives, legit. And I also want to point out, you don't always have to find a reason for the persecution. I know for some people, they always want to know, they're always asking for the why and how come and all of the things, you know, always want an answer to whatever. But being a targeted individual and being persecuted does go together many times. And in fact, those things can be one and the same a lot of times. You know, the reason is other people are simply controlled by these other beings who are usually AI. And you see that more so also in schools, you know, with kids who don't have a set of morals yet, or who don't have a priority of morals, who are on their screens a lot of times, especially nowadays over these past 10, 20 years. And they're just out there to bully because they're infested with entity attachments, you know. And of course, this has always been around to a certain degree, also like in the 40s and 50s, and, you know, maybe even 100 years ago, absolutely. But you see that more, like the cyberbullying, all of that, and especially in kids, it's gotten out of hands. And I do think kids and teenagers have way more, well, adults can have a lot of entity attachments too, but I think kids and teenagers have a lot anyhow, because they're being targeted in a different way. You know, they start off with more purity, and then once you turn into an adult, you know, you already have a lot of your brain areas developed, you know. Like the hippocampus is one of them that doesn't develop until you're in your mid-20s, depending on each person individually. But those are just a few things. So the thread of persecution can go throughout your life. It can really start when you're a kid already. You know, like for some people, this shapes out to be the black sheep of the family. For me specifically, that actually wasn't necessarily the case, but I do know for a few people that was the case. Or, as I already talked about that in a few previous videos as well, you have this very challenging relationship with your main caregiver, which is usually the mother for a lot of people. And that kind of, you know, puts like this sour thing in your path, and like, okay, so now the family life doesn't feel as peaceful as it should. Then you enter school and you're very eager to learn and all those things, but then there's bullying in school, you know. Okay, so you go through that, you're a teenager, everything, there's other things thrown in your path. Then you're a young adult, you made it through university or somehow through your apprenticeship or whatever it is that you want to do. Now you're at a workplace, and now you're being backstabbed and bullied over there. And then you continue on having a family, maybe you want to marry, have children, whatever it is that you want in your life. And now it's the mother-in-law that's being sour with you. Now it's like your spouse's siblings that hate your guts or who are up against you. You know, like one side of the family is really trying to persecute you somehow or speak bad about your own family. So, you know, if you had it easy in life, mind you, great for you. But for people who are under this persecution trauma, this is simply just not the case. And a lot of times, you know, it's going to be psychic attacks. It's going to be like the trolling, all of that. You know, for me personally, before I even had social media, yes, there was also a persecution theme running through my life. Absolutely. Especially as a child and a teenager. And for me, the school bullying was a huge one, where I started noticing, you know, there's no reason why these kids don't like me, don't like my family. So for me, it was more the persecution trauma in my entire family and lineage. There's no real reason. So we had to switch schools quite a few times. Well, not that many times, but we had to switch at least once because it got really out of hand in one school. And for me back then already, this is where people weren't really under the influence of screens yet and everything. But for me back then already, I knew something's just weird, you know, like why are they acting like that towards me and also others? It wasn't just me, but other kids too. And then with yet others, it's like a switch is being turned on to act that way. And then with others, it's like the opposite. So I already knew back then something's really off and strange here. Nowadays, you have the trolling. So you know, you have obviously the social media trolling. People are trying to get off social media because of that, also other reasons. But you know, like the trolling is a huge one that already says, okay, these are either bots sent by random 3-letter agencies that are trolling. It makes no sense what they're even talking about. It comes out of nowhere. or these are really these empty containers that are controlled by these AI entities that are trying to troll your channel or others. Or you don't even have to have a channel. You know, you can have just be on social media, uh, not even have like your full name or whatever, and still be attacked. And we saw that very like majorly from 2020 on, where somehow something was turned off, like somehow an AI realm just opened up where people were attacked majorly for either side they were taking of the agenda in 2020. And so I know that happened for me and also friends that I know. But yeah, what are some actual like signs that you could go through? Let me scroll down to that part. So the thing is with persecution trauma, this is why you shouldn't be taken very lightly. It is that people are trying to prevent you from living out your true life purpose, soul purpose, call it whatever, or just the path that you're supposed to be on. Okay. Yes, there are other things that could prevent you from doing that too. But when you're persecuted, you have an issue unfolding to the life that you really desire, that you really want. You don't dare to dream big. You might diminish yourself, your brightness. You might have this fear of shining brightly too, especially after the persecution has happened in one way or another. Speaking up in public, maybe not so good for you. You could have like a clamped up throat, thyroid issues, feeling an actual fear of speaking out, also speaking up against topics that you're actually passionate about, that you know it's right for you to speak up against, but then last minute all of a sudden, no, I know I can't. You know, you're having like that type of fear of really putting yourself forward and in there. And for a lot of people, that is the case, you know. I know, especially for certain types of generation, that's more the case. Like nowadays, it is getting a bit easier, but you know, so you stop what you love to do because of it. You shut down your passions and dreams. You don't stand up for what you truly believe in, and you might fail miserably without giving it another go. It's also a huge one. So once the failure happens, you don't get up again and try again. You just kind of let it go. And so that is a form of not living out according to the potential that you really have. For some, it could be also with reclaiming your name, so not feeling any shame, fear, or inconvenience, or inconveniencing others with your name. You know, if for example, when it's spelled a certain way, others can't pronounce it. You're like, oh yeah, that's how it is. That's how it is. I won't even correct you anymore. So it's really like reclaiming your name is huge, because it's tied to your ancestry, but it's also part of who you are. It's part of your identity. And so when there's an issue with a person's name, I already know, yeah, there's probably a form of persecution that's been going on either with you in your previous life, in a past life, or somewhere in your ancestry. For a lot of people who are interested in spiritual topics, persecution trauma does impact us, because we've been around back then when people were persecuted. Let's just say during the witch hunts, let's just say when people were burned to the stakes. So I do think it's impacting a lot of targeted souls and individuals overall who are also interested in spirituality, or just finding a deeper meaning, a deeper sense to life. And yet for others, this could really be, you know, being the black sheep of the family, or just the mother being jealous of the daughter's beauty, or whatever it is you can think of. You know, if you're like a guy and you had a bad relationship with your father, you know, there are many reasons for this. But also with the spiritual topics, let's just say you're really interested in it, you even have your own like business or services with it. Something that I did experience, especially when I was still in the very beginning of all of this, when I was around certain types of people who were not in the spiritual industry at all. Let's just say they were regular office workers, or someone in an entertainment industry or whatever, had nothing to do with what I was doing. I actually had huge issues telling them what I do, to a degree where I would not even say what I was doing. Really, I would just make up like a different thing that I was doing. You know, I was like, oh, I'm just this freelance graphic designer or whatever, like something I wasn't even doing, because I would have this huge issue. And this does come for me specifically from past lives and also from ancestry, of having been actually burned to the stake a few hundred years ago for being interested in spiritual topics and for talking about spiritual topics and everything. So for me personally, that's how it expressed itself a lot of times in my own life, that I was just clamping up around people, didn't really want to tell them what I do for a living, all those things. So a lot of people could be experiencing that, could also be experiencing it just with other things in your life. And that's something that I would definitely dive deeper into. Now, another thing with trolls in general is, yes, the trolling has really picked up extensively over these past 5 or 6 years or so. I want to say really from 2020 on. but you still just have to be aware that a lot of it, what's happening, those are not really real people a lot of times. And the ones that do portray themselves as real people, let's just say they aren't CGI. They're actually real people. A lot of them are just controlled by these entities too. So just being aware of that might help as well. For me specifically, the moment I realized it picked up a lot was really when I started exposing all these agendas. So this was in January 2021. I remember this because I took a screenshot of it, and I just recently came across it again. It was like January 7th or 8th or something, 2021, where I had this humongous Instagram thing where I was really calling out like 40 something people on it. And for a week straight, it was like you poke into the beehive and all those bees and hornets come out at you. Like for a week straight, that was for me. And ever since then, my number on Instagram, as an example, has always been frozen. It's never gone up. It's just slowly gone down. And even though you gain followers every week, almost every day, even, never really goes up. So they can definitely put a freeze on you. And they do that so that, even if others do come across you, your message is really diminished through that, because people nowadays just believe the numbers more, right? Like than the hard facts that are being presented. So they really do that. When AI does that, that your channel matters, your messages matter. Like people on here on YouTube have told me, oh, we're being unsubscribed, this and that. Very strange that they're doing it if the messages didn't matter. So it's a huge sign that how much you're talking about really does matter. So when you have more trolls, when your numbers are being kept down, it's usually a good sign, because souls get persecuted. Like Robotoys, not so much, maybe a few. Background characters don't get persecuted. Not really, unless they're part of the soul tribe, they're somehow like related to a person who's a soul, maybe. But usually these people don't want to mix with those type of issues. They just want to stay in the background. They don't want to get mingled up in a fight or an attack or something. They usually see them like recording, so let's just say there's like an assault or whatever happening in the subway. They usually don't mix into that. They don't try to break up the fight. No, they just record in the background or like flee into the next subway car. Like I always used to like to use that example, because I actually had it happen in my real life where I sat next to a person who was threatened by another person sitting across from us. And you could literally see all those background characters, all those tourists like scrambling out of the subway car, whereas me and another woman right next to the guy, so it was a guy being attacked, we just sat there. And I swear, like, we gave this guy superpowers somehow to stand up against this bully. I don't know. But I didn't have to say anything in that situation, but I just knew instinctively there's a power to the numbers. There's a power to supporting each other too. And I saw that like in real life once again. So there's just a lot of things, that I have personally experienced in my own life where I just see, yeah, this is just yet another persecution attack. And, you can't even take it serious anymore. Like they're just really trying to get to you, trying to get to your essence, trying to get to your psyche, which is your soul, your energy, everything. So much to that. And I do have to say one good thing, as I'm looking at the numbers right now, we are approaching the numbers that I had almost 2.5 years ago on the old channel, because before it was taken down on this particular channel again. So finally approaching the original number. What a great milestone. And if you've been unsubscribed, definitely resubscribe again. But yeah, I'm personally really passionate about persecution trauma because I've just lived through it so many times, I really see it in a lot of people too. People who go through it as a child, a teenager, young adult, everything, without really knowing much. You don't even have to know much about any of these type of spiritual topics to know when an attack is happening, when you're being targeted, when you're being persecuted, when an entire group of friends turns against you for no reason, when you're like 12 or 13 years old. So nowadays it's more like with the cyberbullying for whatever, in whatever scenario you're in. But yeah, so I do think a lot of people are under this type of influence or experiencing this for sure. And when I experience a type of persecution, when I actually witness it, I don't take it lightly at all, because it also means they're trying to energetically shut you down. And that's a big one if they do succeed. And I hope this has helped someone who's dealing with this right now, and what persecution trauma is, how it expresses itself in your life. Don't let them win. Be aware of what's happening. And if you think this is something because you are targeted, are being persecuted, most likely that is truly the reason. And trust your intuition over anything.